this podcast is called Your Intended Message. So when you say there's no I in team, there are at least 50 different interpretations of that one line. So what is your intended message? You most likely lost the plot a while ago, and because you didn't know what to say, you just stick to something you read in some calendar in the kitchen in the morning.
My guest today is Niels Brabandt. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Niels. 1, he successfully built and sold a business so he could speak from real-world experience regarding leadership. 2, unlike many others, he did the scientific research on leadership, which means that he has proof and evidence for his claims. And 3, not only did he practice leadership in business, but also in sports. He was a professional football, what we call in North America soccer. He was a referee for decades. Niels Brabandt, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Hi, George. Great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Delighted to be talking with you across the ocean here today. And you talk about sustainable leadership.
I do indeed, yes.
And what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you know if it's working?
Well, normally you see with the result of the business if it's working or not. At least in the long run, you can see how sustainable you are as a leader. And there's no one word answer or one phrase answer how sustainable leadership works, as it has multiple components that all work together. However, it's all about not having the leaders in place, as you probably know, like in the 90s or even earlier, where people said, I have my leadership style and my people have to adopt to it. However, good leaders are now able to adopt to their people in their organization and choose either if it's transactional, transformational, a situative approach, how to deal with motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. There are quite a number of factors they have to take into consideration, because as we all know, there's a shortage of talent, meanwhile, in basically any industry and in any job. So it's not really on the table anymore as an offer that you can say, whatever I do, there will be enough people who are up for the job. No, it is you who have to prove, are you worth of the people you are leading? Because if not, they will probably choose to have another leader in another organization.
And so by the term sustainable leadership, it sounds like you're talking about a sustainable team.
Yeah, sustainable teams are part of that, definitely. The different team phases, which are probably known. However, many people only connect sustainability to aspects like the environment or recycling. And that is not the only aspect we need to talk about. It's about employee retention. It is about focusing on your employees. But most importantly, we need people who know their craft. Do a podcast as you do here without doing the research, how to do the tech, how to do the audio, the video, the lighting. However, we often have people who became leaders basically either because someone else quit and they were promoted, or someone else thought they are a good leader and they were just picked, or unfortunately, quite often based on their network. I don't want to call out cronyism or nepotism here. However, in many cases, people became leader because other people said, I like you, I know you, and here you are with your leadership job. If you do not know the scientific background, if you do not know the tools, and I do not mean opinions, I mean proper scientifically proven tools, if you do not know them, there is no chance you can be a good leader. Some people have a bit more talent, maybe a bit more empathy, a bit more approach to it naturally, but that will not work in the long run. You still need the proper tools. And scientific evidence tells you if something works or not. No motivational or inspirational one-liner ever paid the rent or made a team go the extra mile for longer than probably 24 hours.
And it's funny when you say that about no motivational line. There are some leaders that think that they have to have a motivational line, and the one that comes to mind right now that I think is just ugly is there's no I in team.
Oh God, now here we go again. Yeah, but there's an M and an E in the team, right? So there we go. So this is the one. This is one of the most common one-liners. There is no I in team. So what? So what does that mean? Are we talking about different team phases, norming, storming, performing, adjourning? So there are many different approaches to leadership when it comes to managing a team. And this podcast is called Your Intended Message. So when you say there's no I in team, there are at least 50 different interpretations of that one line. So what is your intended message? You most likely lost the plot a while ago, and because you didn't know what to say, you just stick to something you read in some calendar in the kitchen in the morning. And that never leads to anything sustainable. People need more than a short-term inspiration when it comes to listening to a leader, following a leader, and also, and that's the most important part of it, getting results done in an organization.
Niels, you mentioned that there are scientific tools that a leader needs to understand and apply. Give us a look at some of those, please.
So I just give you the most. So let's take one which already is normally often taken out of context or not known at all. The difference between transactional and transformational work. Today, you often hear that people say, oh, we only have transformational leader. We are only transformational. Our whole organization works only transformational, which is, no matter what you do, not true. I just give you a very short definition, of course, very short here. Transactional basically means you tell people what to do. They do exactly what you want them to do. So the big advantage is you know what they do, and also you get exactly what you want. The problem is you have basically no innovation curve. People probably could do it quicker, but they say, why should I do it quicker? They gave me time till Friday, so why be finished earlier? They won't give you feedback. And also you have to define very clearly what the task is. So when, for example, they are finished and they didn't tell you that they are finished, they could claim, well, you didn't tell us to tell you when we are finished. It was not part of the task. So you have to very clearly define what the task is. Basically, transactional leadership means that people work by the order. They get orders and they fulfill the order. Transformational leadership means that people understood the spirit, the idea, the whole concept of their job. So they know by themselves, after, of course, they had an amazing onboarding, hopefully, what the job is they have to fulfill. They will never sit there and say, well, I think this organization, I think I completed that game, so let's wait if something's happening, because that's not what any leader does, at least not any reasonable leader. You always know that you have more ideas and aspects and jobs and tasks on the table, then the day has hours, basically. And your job is to prioritize, to choose. And then, of course, which is the big disadvantage, is also live with the fact that some people might come across with an unpleasant truth, with an unpleasant idea, or with an idea where you say, oh, you just opened Pandora's box with that one. So transactional leadership means you give people orders. Transformational leadership means people understood what their position is about. You need both in any organization. As soon as you hear, oh, we only do transformational work, it doesn't exist. Someone has to do all the invoices. Someone has to follow packaging. Someone has to follow shipping. Someone has to do regulatory compliance and laws, which are not to be interpreted and let's see how we work with them. They have to be very clearly followed up, which often is transactional work. So you need transactional work as well as transformational work. None of these two are better or worse. Of course, there is a higher risk that transactional work, as it follows clear rules, might become automated in a whatever distant future, may be more near or more far. However, transactional work is needed because otherwise no one gets the jobs done that no one else wants to do, or even jobs that people want to do, but simply are very repetitive, maybe very monotonous. And still these jobs need to get done. If you, for example, work in bookkeeping and your job is to do accountancy, invoice gets in, you book the invoice, you pay the invoice, it is very transactional in many contexts, not always. More senior accountants are very transformational, for example. But at the end, you need both. You need to know who in your team is transactional, wants to be led transactional in a transactional way, who in your team is transformational, wants to be led in a transformational manner, and you need to know how to lead your people. Unfortunately, most leaders say, well, I am XYZ, and many leaders are, for example, transformational, and they say, oh, you're not thinking enough. Oh, you do it wrong. Why didn't you see the next step? Well, probably because you have someone in your team who wants to be led in a transactional way, in a transactional manner. So being able to distinguish between transactional and transformational work is just the beginning. We can also talk about Ronald Heifetz from Harvard University about how to do adaptive task, adaptive leadership, or technical leadership. That's a bit more advanced than differentiating different tasks. But if I only talk about transactional and transformational in an organization, 3 out of 4 give me the answer, oh, we don't do transactional, we are only transformational here. And that is impossible. In every business, there are steps where simple steps or more or less simple steps have to be followed up, and they might be repetitive, they might be monotonous. However, they need to be done. And that is the first rule, for example, people need to be able to fulfill to be a sustainable leader. That's, of course, one out of probably about 30 or 40 to have the basic set of what they need to fulfill, need to master to be a good leader.
Do you have a critical presentation coming up? One that can influence the direction of your career or business? How can you be ready to give it your best? Contact me. I'm George Torok, the speech coach for executives. Together, we can create and polish a superior presentation that will get you your desired results. So who decides who's transactional and who's transformational?
Well, the people decide that. So when you have someone who, for example, I give you an example. I have an assistant, and when I hired the assistant, we talk about how do you want to work, and then that person said, "Well, the perfect week for me," because I always ask people, "How does your perfect week look like?" And the person said to me, "Well, my perfect week would be you give me a list of tasks which I fulfill, and you tell me which task has to be done in that week until which day." That is very transactional, and that's exactly what I was looking for in an assistant. However, I looked at also, for example, when we have emergencies, let's say we have strike action, suddenly I can't fly or I can't go by train. I need someone who proactively is able to change my whole path of travel. And that's what that person is able to do. However, 80% of the task is transactional, 20% is transformational, where you really have to figure out what do you need to do next by yourself. Still, there's no black, white, yes, no, A or B, transformational or transactional. You can be somewhere in between, but often you have a preference. But it's the people who decide. If you want to choose, if you choose to develop someone from one area to the other, it's a lot of work because it is often strongly connected to their personality. And when people have a certain personality and an idea how their job should look like, they're often not very keen to switch, except when they by themselves decided. They said, "Hey, I've done this transactional job for a while. I want to have more responsibility, more accountability, want to lead people. Can you teach me?" That normally means you develop someone from one area to the other. However, it's very important to say it is not that one is better than the other, because very frequently you hear, "Oh, yeah, the transformational part is more for the academic people, and the transactional part is more for like factory workers." And that is nothing else than academic arrogance that no one needs anywhere on this planet.
And so it sounds like first a leader needs to realize that it's a lie to say that we are a transformational organization and everyone.
Yeah, transformational only does not exist. Yeah.
And then the next step is they need to understand the nature of the work within their organization, transactional versus transformational. And then they need to understand where people are most comfortable.
Exactly. I mean, George, just to ask you a question, if that's okay. Let's say you work somewhere and someone will tell you that's the job you like to do, probably, please do this job, full stop, and you would never be asked if you like to do it. How likely is it that you would say, "Well, that was an amazing onboarding. Thank you very much for this process"?
Not likely at all. No.
Exactly. So the leader has to figure out, because sometimes people don't know about these concepts, transactional, transformational, and they don't have to know. It's the leader's job to know that. They have to figure out who in my team is transactional, who in my team is transformational, because we have a certain effect, which unfortunately affects recruiting. People like to recruit people who are exactly like themselves. It's called isomorphism. Iso, Greek for equal, more for appearance. So when someone is exactly like you prefer to work together with them. However, when you are a transformational leader, you have a transactional job to give away. You hire a person who prefers to work transformational because they are just like you. They probably quit within the first couple of months because they will say, "Look, I was looking for something where I have time on my own and I can decide and steer people and lead people. And you basically gave me a repetitive task to do every single day. That's not for me." So it's very important. The leader has to figure out who is transactional and who is transformational.
And is it necessary for the leader to be a transformational type person?
Not necessarily. I'll give you an example. One of my friends has a PhD in chemistry, works in Manchester in a laboratory. And when I visited him, he was totally fascinated by this and showed me one of their test environments. I have no idea about this chemistry stuff. And then he said, "Oh, we take this liquid from here, then we put it in there, then we measure something, and then we can see if the quality is consistent or if what we produce is, let's say, a bit too much off the scale. There's a certain tolerance, but not too much." So I asked him, when there's a new product they have, he's doing the same step 5,000 times. And he said, no, with every pipette, I have 10 each. Where I said, well, that's 500 times. That's still a lot. He said, yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. And he's leading the team. He loves to do this job. And the job is very transactional, still very high quality, very high academic education needed. And he's a leader. So he is a leader in a very transactional space. When you, for example, work in events and you probably have temporary staff that comes and goes, students, and you have to do shift plans every single day, maybe every single week. You have to tell people, hey, this is where the drinks are, this is where this is, do this, do that, build up this, take down that. You're a leader, but it's very transactional. So it is not necessary to be a transformational leader. However, certain positions in organizations where people say, we expect you to develop people, we expect you to develop concepts, we expect you to develop products and sales concepts. Many of today's jobs in the leadership area are primarily transformational. We can say that.
And Niels, in the changing world we live in, with more people continuing to work remotely.
Yes.
What impact does that have on the concept of sustainable leadership?
It's very important to know that before that, when you had people on site, you had a so-called sequential perception of leadership. So as soon as something happened, you could normally see either the atmosphere changes, people start chatting, or people complain to you directly, and you could immediately intervene. However, since we work remotely, and especially when you have, let's say, one of these settings where you say 3 days remote and 2 days on site, or remote only, there might be days or even weeks, sometimes months, where you do not see the people who work for you. It means when something goes wrong, suddenly people don't have a sequential perception of leadership where they always see you and you can intervene because you see something went wrong and you see them talking about it. You have a so-called episodical perception of leadership. It means people see you in very short episodes, sometimes even only online, and things might go wrong in the team already, but you will not see it because you do not see them. And that means that especially in a remote setting, you need to take care of opinion leadership. Opinion leadership means someone in your team, the team that you're leading, steps up, often either voluntarily or that it just happens by social circumstances. Suddenly people are listening to one person of that team. And this opinion leader is very important to you, not only to get information, but also to inform people early. Maybe you can spread a bit of information for them. And also, for example, let's just imagine, George, if I would ask you, let's say you are a team member of me, and there are two options. Option number one, I have this new software which needs to be implemented, and I, as your manager, tells you this is the implementation. Or I gave it to the opinion leader in your team, and one of your colleagues, who is the opinion leader, starts to talk very positively about the new software that's coming. What do you think, which approach is more successful or more likely to be successful?
Certainly the second approach, where a colleague is expressing their opinion versus the boss saying this is how it's going to be.
Exactly. And that is what you now need to know. Opinion leadership is way more important. And very important also, and that is the latest point where leaders need to move. When you look into science, when the opinion leader decides to not accept the leader anymore, it is called a social delegitimization. So you're not legitimized anymore with the team on a social level. As soon as the team listens to the opinion leader, and they always listen more to the opinion leader than to the factual leader, when the opinion leader says, not you, your job as a leader will fall. The question is not if, the question is only when. And by the way, we have the same in football, soccer. When the team decided that manager, not anymore, it is just a matter of time until the manager is replaced, which is also, by the way, the right decision, because the manager obviously missed a lot of signs, ideas, and obviously, to get to the name of the podcast, didn't get their intended message right.
And how is the opinion leader anointed?
Well, it's normally someone who is it's normally someone who is good at what they are doing. So they are legitimized by being good at their job. It is someone who is normally, at least when you look into numbers, it is more likely they are a bit more extroverted, has more extroversion than introversion. And it is someone who dares to speak up against leaders. So people who, for example, say, hey, I have an issue, but I don't want to talk to my boss. But I just tell you, I think that our working hours are way too long and he's asking for overhours again. Many of us have children. And I know when I go to him, he's going to say, this is how work works. maybe you can talk to him because I'm on the brink of looking for a different job. And then the opinion leader is able to speak in the name of the team, talk to the leader. And when the leader and the opinion leader have a good relationship, which they hopefully always have, then the opinion leader can say, hey, look, something is going on in the team and you need to act on that. If you're asking for more over hours, the team will basically fall apart, or at least 2 or 3 people are going to leave in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And that is not very helpful. That's not only very helpful for you as a leader, it also saves you time, because in a remote setting, many leaders say, I don't have enough time to speak to every team member every week. So what can I do? And the opinion leader can take over a lot of leadership jobs you normally have to do. It is very important that the social legitimization that you have is more important than ever in an online world. In a remote setting, if you're socially not legitimized anymore, you're done as a leader, which also means, by the way, and that is something which severely changed from the old on-site model to the model we have right now. When people say, look, I'm a leader because I'm good at what I'm doing, I am an expert in the field, but this whole social stuff, the Christmas parties, the online socials, this just hanging out together, that thing is just not for me. In an on-site setting, that already didn't work too well, but it worked somehow because you still saw each other at least in the break room once or twice a day. In a remote setting, there's no chance people are going to accept you in the long run, because people simply say, look, you're good at what you're doing, but basically the opinion leader I have in my team is doing the job for you. I consider that person my leader. You're just someone who gets a higher salary and has a fancy title on the business card in your email signature. But to me, you're basically no one I would listen to. I would just listen to the person who's the opinion leader in my team.
How can the official leader find and nurture an opinion leader?
That's a very good question. And that's also a very important step. So when you don't know who, so often you will find out the opinion leader in your team because they normally speak up pretty quickly. When you don't know who your opinion leader is, because probably you switch jobs, you want to find out quickly who's the opinion leader, you will find out when you talk to certain people. You talk to your whole team and suddenly one person is referenced way more often than anyone else. Oh, you should talk to that person. Oh, you want to know who is a good contact for the bookkeeping? Yeah, just ask that person. They know anyone here. Oh, you want to go to the board level? Yeah, I don't think you can approach them directly. Maybe ask that person because they know someone who knows someone who can get you in contact with the board. Normally, opinion leaders are excellent networkers. And also, when you are a leader in today's online and remote setting world, networking and building a quality business network, and I do not mean just promoting your best friends from university or high school into positions they do not belong to, which is still way too common in the economy. So when you build a quality network, that will help you a lot. So when you look at your team right now and say, I don't know who the opinion leader is, talk to people, talk about different aspects and steps you need to do where you need help, and suddenly you will find that they reference one person way more often than anyone else in the team. That's your opinion leader.
And is the role of opinion leader a training ground for a future leader?
Can be. It depends if the person wants to be, and that is an issue we have more frequently in today's times, where some people say, because often you, of course, hope, hey, maybe I'm going to retire. So what about you taking over the department? And back in the days, the quota of people saying, yes, why not, was reasonably high. Today, you have a rising number of people who say, look, I have my week, I have my family, or I have friends or a hobby. I have a very clear time frame for work. And as soon as I would be the leader of the department, that time frame would expand massively. I would get more money. But when I see what's net on the account after taxes, it's just not worth the time for a couple of hundred more. So thank you, no, thank you, basically what they say. It's very important that it is a good training ground. And also people already have leadership experience without knowing. It's called lateral leadership. When you lead people without being the leader, it's lateral leadership. However, there's a higher number of people who say, I'm not interested in doing the job on a formal level, because that is normally connected to a lot of responsibility and accountability, might require additional skills. Some of them probably want to do it, and that's why they became the opinion leader in the first place. But always look at the fact, are they doing it voluntarily? Do they really agree on being the leader? Or are they sitting there and they are basically too insecure to tell you, well, I want to say no, but that sounds very unthankful. When I say no, I just fear to face consequences afterwards. So I say yes, although I want to say no. be sure if they really say an honest yes, or they just say yes because you expect them to say yes. And also, when the people say no, the opinion leader stays in the team. The next leader you hire needs to know who is the opinion leader, because they need to work together in the future. However, good training ground. Is it a good training ground? Absolutely. Is it a guarantee that you find a great new leader? No, because some people decided that leadership on a formal level is just not for them. And to be fair, it is their right to say that.
And what happens when the opinion leader and the group leader get into conflict?
So when the opinion leader and the group leader get into conflict, the end of the game nearly almost is that the group leader leaves afterwards. That is normally the more wise decision. In a bad environment, the group leader who's unable to convince his own people or her people, their people, when a group leader is unable to convince their people to follow them, they often people give me the metaphor and say, oh, I just chopped off the head of the Hydra and fired that person. And I always tell these people, look, when you are talking about metaphors and the Hydra, you should read the story to the end, because when you chop off the head, two new appear. So basically you just doubled the problem. And that's exactly what happens. As soon as you fire an opinion leader, not only will you always lose people, because they normally work somewhere else and they take people with them, because they say, I just changed jobs because I was fired here, and I know the good people from my team, I just take them with me. And of course, that's nothing you want to do. As soon as there's a conflict, start to talk. Do not be confrontational. Always enter any talk with a question. Questioning is always better than making confrontational statements of "I'm right, you're wrong," etc. Do a lot of questioning. And when you disagree, there's always an option to respectfully agree to disagree. If you disagree on substantial matters, science, proof, and evidence is the way to go. Your personal opinion as a manager, I just give you an example. When people say, I don't think remote work is good for us, people just sit at home, not work, and get a full salary and work part-time, which is, by the way, what 2 CEOs from stock exchange listed UK companies said in the last 6 months, basically telling all of their staff, I think you're lazy, and then complaining why they have an employee turnover afterwards. How very surprising. When these people get into conflict and there is no solution, firing the opinion leader is only acceptable when, for example, they go against compliance, the laws, or they are toxic opinion leaders who just play games, political games or whatever else games. If there's any other reason, as soon as they get into conflict resolution, you can have a mediation. There are many different ways what you can do. However, when you have to decide, keep the group manager or keep the opinion leader, and there's nothing that speaks against the opinion leader on a formal level, keep the opinion leader and your team over group manager. Group managers are easier to replace than opinion leaders.
Niels, if people would like to know more about you and your services, the place to find you is at your website, and we have that link in the description below. And just tell us for those who like to hear it.
Yeah, so first, the easiest way to reach out to me is via LinkedIn. Niels Brabandt on LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me. I have my website, www.nb-networks.com. I also have a podcast, leadership podcast, on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And you find me on social media. Feel free to contact me, Instagram, Facebook. I'm basically on any reasonable platform and available to chat with you and take it from there.
And you can find some of those links in the description below. Niels, as we prepare to wrap up here, if you could sit down with a new leader, group leader, yes, who's approach an environment where there is hybrid, it's a hybrid model, there's remote work. If you could give them 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice to get a good quick start on bringing the team together and keeping and sustaining the team, what might be that 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice?
Yeah, so first, what you should do is, and I quote Richard Hackman from Harvard University, so I'm talking about scientific evidence, not my opinion, do a proper team relaunch. So you sit together. Step number 1 is you define the goals. What do you want to achieve? Number 2, you define how do you communicate. I give you an example. When, for example, you have meetings, you have audio and video turned on, because otherwise people just sit there, do not listen, and they do other jobs on the side. So really get communication and regulation what do you want to do in which way? When do we use mail? When do we use calls? When do we use WhatsApp or whatever else? Set up some rules so just communication is streamlined and efficient. Number 3 is always be aware of local realities. When you are a leader, most likely in a very modern, hybrid, maybe international space, never say, this is how we work, because that normally means here is my culture and you either align or you die. And that is not how anyone wants to work. So sit down, consider local realities and find a common ground how to work together. There are excellent books by Richard Hackman about how to design this team relaunch. Have an offsite day with your team, just one day, maybe do something social in the evening afterwards, and then you can take it from there. When you have one proper team relaunch in a hybrid setting, you will be way more efficient and way more effective in what you do, because at the end of the day, when we talk about who do people like to work for, they say a great leader, a sustainable leader. However, people always say, I need to like that person as well. I need to know who do I work for. And all that can be done in one proper day of team relaunch.
Valuable advice. My guest today is Niels Brabandt, reminding you that good leaders adapt to the people.
If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you convey your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.